In this story, I'm going to tell you how I forced my father to choose me again. I didn't scream. I didn't expose anyone. But I did stage a quiet, public act, flowers and glass vials of my mother's memories, so he could no longer pretend I was invisible. What he saw when he stopped changed everything, and the revenge I wanted turned into something far stranger and more powerful. I am Evelyn Hart, 34, born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, and I have spent most of my adult life trying to be the steady one in a family that never quite learned steadiness. I run a small event floral business out of a studio behind my bungalow near Forsyth Park. I like the way the Spanish moss looks at dusk, the smell of the river after a thunderstorm, and I take comfort in rituals, watering the succulents, eating coffee and toast at exactly 8, folding my father's shirts when he leaves a weekend visit. My mother died when I was 26, and since then my relationship with my father, Marcus, has been the complicated center of my world. We are codependents in small ways that add up to a lot. He is loud, charismatic, and reckless in love. He falls hard and fast, and he expects me to be an audience and a shield. For years, I tolerated it because the man used to be my safe place, but after my mother died, he started to change. He started dating anyone who would listen, moved people in and out of our lives as if the house were a revolving door, and I found myself doing the emotional labor for everyone else. 2 years ago, he married a woman named Lena. She moved into the house, cooked dinners that he loved, and played quiet bridge with his friends on Sundays. For the first year, I tried to be reasonable. I cheered at their engagement. I edited the wedding playlist. I bought flowers for their shared space. I told myself this family could expand if I let it. Then Lena began to cross lines that felt intolerable to me. She rearranged my mother's tea set into a back cabinet without asking. She hosted dinner parties and did not invite me. She called my father, Marcus the husband, in front of his friends, as if he belonged to her. The small cuts added up until the whole thing became a bruise. The worst moment came when she accused me of stealing prescription pain medicine from the bathroom after a big event weekend. I found the bottle pushed back on a high shelf, and she told Marcus I was responsible. He did not ask me before he believed her. He looked at me with confusion and shame, and something inside me broke. That night I slept on the couch, and when I woke up, the house felt foreign. The problem I had to solve was both small and enormous. How did I get my father back, and how did I get him to see how his choices were hurting me? My nemesis was not just Lena. My nemesis, in the end, was my father's habit of choosing comfort and denial over asking hard questions. He would rather accept an easier story than confront the truth. There are memories that live like photographs in my chest. My mother teaching me to braid hydrangea stems for corsages while humming a hymn. My father drunk on laughter and beer at a backyard barbecue, telling me with a conspiratorial wink how proud he was. The three of us in the kitchen on late nights, planning a picnic and arguing over whether to bring lemon pound cake. After she died, those pictures faded at the edges, and Marcus started sewing new ones with strangers who had no place in them. I folded his shirts because it was the only way to feel near someone I loved without having to ask too many questions. The rituals kept me anchored: coffee and toast at 8, watering the succulents, sweeping petals from the studio floor at dusk, small acts that meant I still belonged somewhere. But belonging is fragile when the people who define your world prefer a comforting story to the messier truth. When Marcus believed Lena over me, it wasn't just that he took her side. He took a story that denied our shared past. I wanted my home to be mine again, and I wanted to be treated like a daughter, not a suspicion or an afterthought. I told myself I would try to be patient. I told myself I would show him who I was by continuing to be steady. And yet, in the quiet hours, I drafted other plans. Not cruel, not vengeful in the way that destroys, but precise as arranging stems, arrangements that would make him look, really look, at what his choices meant. Because sometimes the only way someone will change is if the familiar shape of their life is altered enough that they have to notice what's missing. I tried to solve things in the only ways I knew. First, I tried talking. I started leaving him notes on the kitchen counter with memories of things we had done together, small reminders of who we had been before the marriage. A ferry ride that made Marcus laugh until he cried, my mother humming over a pot of grits, the night we watched Persephone bloom on the back stoop. I would tuck those scraps under the sugar jar or lean them against the crock where we kept wooden spoons, hoping a line or two might bruise through the armor of his distraction. I told him calmly that I felt shut out and that I missed him. He would smile and nod and promise he understood, then disappear for a weekend with Lena and come back smelling of her perfume as if scent could rewrite what I had said. Those promises started to sound like polite weather forecasts, pleasant and empty. When that did not fix anything, I changed my approach. I kept records of the times I was excluded, the dinner invitations I did not receive, the party calendars that did not include me, the nights Marcus came home late without explanation. I printed emails where he copied everyone but me, photographed the cardigans Lena left draped over the chair I used to claim, logged the dates I had been told, "We'll let you know," and then never known. I thought proof might help. It did not. Marcus loved proofs that fit the versions of life he preferred, discrepancies he could fold into his argument and tape over. When I brought up Lena's accusation about the medicine, he told me he trusted her and that I should be less sensitive. That look of confusion and almost pity he gave me felt worse than anger. It was as if he decided my hurt was an inconvenient draft and could be closed with reassurance. I began to spiral. I stopped caring for a week about watering my succulents, watching their pale leaves tuck in like little disappointed hands. I showed up late for a wedding delivery and let a centerpiece sit in the van longer than it should have. A client called the next day asking if I was all right. My business suffered a small but noticeable wobble. Friends asked if everything was okay, and I lied, because saying the truth felt like admitting I had failed at a thing I had always believed I could protect: my family life. Inside, I felt like a ghost in my own home, moving through rooms that remembered me better than the people in them. The longer I waited, the more patient I tried to be, the worse things got. The climax of that slow slide was Thanksgiving. My father and Lena insisted on hosting. My sister, who lives 3 states over, asked if she could fly in and stay with me. I said yes, desperately wanting family company, wanting an ally whose presence was proof that I had not made everything up. On the morning of Thanksgiving, Lena called to warn me that she and Marcus would be bringing a. I paused because the sentence had to go on, but I had to keep the text continuous as requested. The call was curt and condescending, and she said, offering the invitation like a test, that we all had to get along and that everything should be perfect. I went that night with a casserole and a hope for civility. At dinner, Marcus announced they were moving into my childhood room. Lena had convinced him it was better to keep their life separate, and she wanted a study. He had not asked me. I walked outside and sat on the stoop, the Spanish moss heavy in the air, and for the first time in years I felt truly small. My sister, who had driven down, sat with me, took my hand, and asked me if I wanted to stay or go. I chose to go, because staying would have meant swallowing more hurt. I think back to the days when Marcus would tiptoe into the kitchen at dawn to make me bad coffee, when his laugh filled the living room and the house felt like an accordion that could stretch to fit anyone. Those mornings had been ordinary, and ordinary felt like safety. Now the ordinary had been scooped out and replaced with a polite newness that smelled faintly of lemon oil and the fabric of other people's routines. That night, Marcus sent me a text. "You should be more grateful, Evelyn. You are making this bigger than it is." I did not text back. My attempts at peaceful resolution had failed. I had lost not only the place at the table, but my father's basic, unquestioned belief that I was his daughter first. The wounds widened. I felt betrayed, abandoned, and foolish for having hoped. The small humiliations, helpful hands rerouted away from me, joking references to my absence as if it were voluntary, the way Lena called him Marcus the husband, stacked like unpaid bills. I teetered on the edge of surrender. I could have left the city, closed my studio, and pretended none of it mattered. I almost did. The morning after, a client canceled a large spring wedding and I panicked, thinking maybe everything in my life was unfixable. Flowers sat half-ordered on my desktop, the scent of eucalyptus like a question. I wandered the studio, touching vases as if they might reassure me. For a while I let myself grieve. I skipped watering the succulents. I answered the phone with a voice that sounded hollow even to my own ears. But sorrow shifted into something sharper. Anger flared, not loud and consuming, but precise, like a pair of pruning shears cutting away what was dead so new stems might grow. I replayed the Thanksgiving scene in my head until the details felt like evidence. Lena casual, practiced slight, my father quick, disbelieving look when she accused me, the teeth in her smile when she rearranged my mother things without a word. I remembered patching my mother teacup back into its place by lamplight, hands small and trembling, thinking if I could just restore the pattern, then maybe the world would right itself. But the pattern would not be restored by me alone. That realization was a kind of liberation, painful and necessary. So I left that night with a casserole and the suitcase my sister lent me. I did not flee so much as step out to see the edges of my life, to learn what I would accept and what I would not. The stoop where I sat had held other decisions before, first kisses, a goodbye to grief, and now it held the beginning of one I intended to keep. I promised myself I would try one more thing, not to beg for belonging, but to show what belonging looked like when it belonged to me. The city smelled of rain and cut grass, and though I felt small, there was a pulse beneath the hurt, a kind of stubborn light that would not be extinguished. But I was not someone who could sit in sorrow without action. I decided to make one last attempt that would force a reckoning. I planned something that would make him see what his choices meant, but I promised myself it would not be cruel. I would not publicly humiliate him. I would make him feel the loss he had caused by experiencing the absence of what he had taken for granted. I called my sister and asked a favor. Come home for the weekend of the annual Savannah Waterfront Arts Festival. She said yes without hesitation, the way sisters do for one another, and I booked a room at a small bed and breakfast where I used not to sleep as a teenager, but had always liked the porch light. I started to stage my life as if I were moving forward without waiting for him to catch up. I took extra freelance jobs and poured myself into the studio, sharpening routines that soothed me, sweeping the wood floor until it smelled like lemon oil, steaming ribbon for hours until the creases softened, sketching installations on napkins at the diner. I invited clients to the studio rather than doing meetings at his house. I spent time with friends who had been patient with me, laughing about things that made no sense to anyone else, and I let their normalcy stitch me back together. The plan culminated in a public but quiet act. I arranged a pop-up floral installation along the promenade during the festival, a display of my mother's favorite flowers mixed with notes folded inside glass vials. I raided the studio's jars and lanterns, tied sprigs of tarragon and rosemary to stems to root the smells in memory. Each note was a memory, an inside joke, a ferry ride to Hilton Head, the way my mother hummed when she cooked grits on a Sunday. I wrote in my mother's uneven hand sometimes, slipping in lines I remembered her saying, even when they weren't mine. I sold nothing. I invited people to take a note and leave a wish for someone they missed. I printed a small flyer that told the story of how losing someone can change the shape of the people left behind. I did not mention Marcus by name. I did not plan a confrontation. I only hoped to be visible in a way he could not ignore. On the second day of the festival, Marcus walked by with Lena. He moved through the crowd as if the promenade were his stage. She walked close, hand light in his, smiling the way she always did when she wanted to show ownership. They stopped short when they saw the installation. He did not know it existed. He had not read the flyer before he saw me, standing in the middle of the promenade, arranging a last-minute bouquet for a little girl who wanted a corsage. The child's laugh and the salt air made everything look softer. The way he looked at me was a blend of recognition and a tiny, breaking regret. Lena smiled politely and made a move to pull him forward, but he did not go. He asked me why I had not told him. I told him softly that I had told him for months, but he had not listened. The crowd around us fell away, and for a moment I saw him with a clarity I had not had in years. Not the man who got swept up by anyone, but the scared man who missed his wife and did not know how to live without a partner. I could see the tremor at the edge of his voice, the way his jaw clenched when he swallowed the word responsibility. He accused me of putting him on display. I told him I was not trying to punish him. I was trying to be the person I would have been if I had been given the chance. Honest, present, and not unseen. I thought of my mother's porch light and the way it had always been a promise, someone being awake and waiting, and I wanted him to understand that I had been waiting too, not as an extension of his life, but as a person with my own rhythm. He left with Lena, but this time he left behind a look that was not indifference. For days afterwards, the small shifts began. Marcus stopped coming by the studio unannounced. He left longer voicemails and read them in a tone that tried to be conciliatory. He brought me a jar of my mother's pickled okra, an awkward piece offering wrapped in familiarity, and asked to meet for coffee. I went. I listened to him tell me about the ways he felt hurt by my supposed distance. He spoke like a man learning a new grammar of apology. I told him I felt hurt by being treated like an intruder in my own home. We argued. We cried. It felt like a small, messy truce more than reconciliation. Then, 3 nights later, Lena packed a bag. It turned out Marcus had lied about a detail of money, something small but symbolic, and she decided she could not live in a house that kept secrets. She left in the middle of the night. I felt a complicated surge of relief and sorrow. Relief because the pressure she had exerted was gone, sorrow because the collapse had been messy and public. Marcus, exhausted, came by the studio the next morning and sat with me among the vases and ribbon. He said, quietly, that he had been afraid to lose the ease of having someone with him and that he had chosen that ease over asking hard questions. He asked if we could try family counseling. I said yes. What followed was not a fairy tale. Counseling sessions were hard. Marcus often slid into defensiveness. But he showed up. He learned to ask instead of assuming. He did small things I had been aching for. He left a note on the kitchen counter saying good morning. He asked before moving my mother's teacups, and he apologized to my sister for excluding her from a holiday dinner. Those apologies were clumsy at first, handwritten on tear-stained stationery or muttered in the doorway, but the crowd of small repairs added up. In the quiet that followed, I felt myself reclaiming the cadence of ordinary life, the rituals that meant I existed in my own story rather than as a shadow in someone else's. When I look back now, 2 years later, my life is quieter but steadier. My floral business grew because I stopped using it as therapy and started using it as craft. I learned to treat arranging like a conversation rather than a confession. Choices of ribbon became arguments resolved, stems a patient reply. I still make time to tend the succulents. Their slow, deliberate lives a lesson in pacing, and to sit on the stoop with a mug of coffee while the city wakes up and the Spanish moss shakes its silver dust into the morning. Those little rituals are not quaint. They are scaffolding for the person I rebuilt. Marcus and I still have hard days, but we also have dinners where he tells me he wants to know what I think about his life choices. He listens now in a way that does not always end in him fixing something, but in him honoring that my voice belongs at the table. He met a woman last summer whom he dated slowly and introduced properly, and he asked me to come to lunch with her first, a small courtesy that felt enormous. The real revenge I had wanted, though, was never to hurt him back. The real revenge was to stop being small. For years, I had traded pieces of myself for the appearance of peace. Choosing myself back felt dangerous and righteous at once. The poetic consequence of my decision was that when I stopped shrinking, my father could no longer ignore the person he raised. He had to choose whether to be a father or to keep drifting. He chose more wisely. He started showing up in ways that were tedious and beautiful. He learned the names of my regular clients. He folded my spare curtains when he visited without turning it into a story for his friends. The unexpected twist is that Lena came back a year later to gather a few plants she said she remembered from when she first moved in. We spoke briefly on the porch, and she said she wished she had known me better. I wished that too. I forgave her in a way that felt like mercy, not weakness, a tidy, private unfastening of the resentments that had weighed me down. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It was a decision to stop letting that particular hurt rearrange my interior furniture. My new normal is not perfect. I still guard the little rituals that mean I exist in my own life. I still set boundaries. No accusations without asking, no rearranging of heirlooms without consent, and nights where if Marcus wants to go out with friends he calls ahead. I sometimes catch myself cataloging old slights, an involuntary inventory, and then I put the list away like a ledger I no longer consult. Most importantly, I learned that the best kind of revenge is not to destroy the person who wronged you, but to build a life so full and so honest that the wrong no longer fits. I built that life piece by piece, bouquet by bouquet, teaching a young apprentice to wire a boutonniere, saying yes to a commission that terrified me, laughing over burnt flans with friends on the back porch. In doing so, I got back more than a room in a house. I got back my place in my own story. The bright consequence is small and constant. When Marcus leaves a note on the counter, now it reads, simply, "Hope you have a good day. Love you." Sometimes the note makes me cry because it sounds like home. Other times it makes me smile because it means the work of reclaiming myself turned out to be the most exact kind of victory.